Welcome back. It's another episode of the Better Learning Podcast. I'm excited to talk to Melissa Turnbaugh. We've been talking about having you on the show for a long time. So first, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited, had this on my calendar. I've been so excited to join and have this opportunity. So thank you.
And you're coming from Texas, working at PKB. Where do you live specifically? Like where?
I'm in Houston. Yeah, I'm in Houston.
Okay. And one of the things that we've had interactions, and I think the first time we met, I'd heard your name for a while, and then you were at a conference in Scottsdale,
What?
which is like my backyard. Like literally, you had dinner like in my neighborhood.
That's
So
awesome.
so I met up with people there, and somebody said you were there. I'm like, wait, I've been wanting to meet her. So that was the first time we had a chance to meet. But would you mind giving a little bit of your background? I always like hearing the story way back to when you were a student. Do you
Oh,
mind
thanks.
starting out? Like, what was school like for you?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm honored. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My parents both worked for the national laboratories, and so we were in Albuquerque, and I loved school growing up. I had such a great experience, but I'd say one of those transformational moments. I didn't love school in second grade. In second grade, um, I was in a combination class. They picked a number of kids. They didn't have enough kids for second or third grade for one additional class. And so they combined a second and third grade class. And so it was kind of 50-50. And so the teacher was struggling so much to teach third graders and second graders. And so I was really kind of bored. And it was at that point that my parents said, well, and the teacher said, maybe she should be tested for our kind of like gifted and talented. And so I took the tests and I ended up getting into the program. But what made it so special was they pulled me away from my normal class and we got to create all like for a couple hours every day. And so we would create shops and we had to run a business and we created logos and icons. And it was this just unbelievably creative, fun kind of escape from a class that was otherwise really hard. And so I think that was a huge changing point, I guess, in my whopping, educational career in second grade. But it really helped me be creative and like have the freedom to be creative. And so then I had a third grade teacher that fostered that. I had parents that started to see, hey, she really likes math and she really likes art. And have you ever considered architecture? And so they planted that little seed and kind of helped foster it. And so it helped kind of, I think, form a lot of my education and with internships and really neat teachers in high school that gave me that freedom to explore before school in a program of all boys, the architectural class. And so I just feel so blessed. But I feel like that moment of maybe otherwise discontent that turned into what
That
might be my career. So
right.
I'm
That's
very,
amazing. You can target it back to second
yeah,
grade and
yeah,
actually see that. I mean, that's
yeah.
like way earlier than most, but that that's really cool because we've had several episodes where we talk about project-based learning, and when we talk about it as adults, we can look back and be like, "Oh yeah, we were kind of doing a few things like that." But I was with you, like mine didn't happen until 6th grade,
Okay.
where there was like this special one, they called it resource, and it was
Okay.
like this pull-out class where we did projects like what you are explaining, but you were doing it
Yeah.
back in second grade. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
It was really cool. It was really cool. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's very cool. So architecture was something you like at what point? Like what point did you think like, hey, that's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to start focusing? Was it while you were in grade
I,
school and high
I mean,
school?
it was in grade school that I was exposed to it. And because I loved, again, creativity, but I also kind of loved the technical of math and the kind of analytics, critical thinking skills. And so when my parents told me about architecture and kind of what it could be, I think that sparked my curiosity. And as I started to spend time doing other things, I kept going back to, no, this is something I really enjoy. And so um, in high school, I pursued a couple, internships and things like that, unpaid. And people kept trying to divert me away. You're not, it's not really for women, or
Wow.
it's, don't worry, you could do something else. And I had this love, and if you know anything about the architecture program, especially in college, you have to love it for the amount of time and commitment that you put in those long, crazy hours. But I did, and I loved the analytics of it. I loved, seeing something that you create come to fruition, whether it be digitally or in form, and now obviously the blessing of buildings. And so I think this is something that it's just been. I'm thankful that I had parents and teachers that were in tune with my kind of aptitudes and interests and helped kind of foster that so that I had this privilege. I look at it with my kids of trying to figure out, well, where are they going to be? Like, I want to give them hopefully the gifts or plant enough seeds that I was given so that they can find what they love and foster that
And how
as a
old are
kid.
your kids now?
I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Okay, so they're getting to
So
that age where,
yes.
yeah, you had that initial
Yeah.
exposure. Do you?
Yes.
Uh, maybe I'll come back to this, but
Okay.
well, I'm going to come back to your story later. But while we're
Okay.
on this, um, do you feel so far like where they're at school, like they are going to have that type of exposure that you had as a kid?
I, I think so. Um, I, I think they're getting opportunities to understand who they are and what their interests are and foster that. And I think that's where you start to, I think, really understand, it's not a job, it's a passion. And so I can already see it, especially in my 6-year-old, even though he's 6, he will have some sort of engineering, mechanical aptitude. He wants to know how everything works. He'll be in deep thought or frustrated about something, and then he'll say, I know how the back of a skee ball machine works. And he starts to
Oh,
explain it. So I think, but that's what his little mind and his heart are going towards. And so hopefully as a parent, I can foster that and then put him in, programs and help encourage teachers to continue that love so that he can continue to kind of fuel it. And then it's not it's learning, but it's fun and it's creative and it's you're hungry for it as opposed to kind of the rigor of school. So
okay. Yeah. See that
yeah.
I think that's fascinating because obviously what we do like career wise, we're exposed to schools, but then we also have this other view of like seeing it through like our kids' lens
Right.
right now. And I'm always like, I mean, my wife and I have these conversations all the time. We're like, oh, knowing what I know on this side of education, like, is like, is there a way that we can influence like the way our kids are being taught in school?
Right.
And it's a never ending discussion for us, at least.
Right. Right. Well, and then as the passionate parent and influencing the school, the more I learn about, the time spent outside and having this kind of freedom for, thought and discovery. I'm a very vocal parent of making sure that it is being incorporated into my kids' school day because I understand the research behind it. And so I want that for all kids, but I also want that for my kids.
Right.
And so probably an overly passionate parent in the
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. I always talk to school leaders as I remember talking to one principal in particular, and I'm like, I was one of those parents today. I sent the email. And I said, I tried to word it nice and I tried to word it be like, hey, I'm not the one that normally complains, but I was just really like surprised to see this. And her reply to me, she's like, every parent thinks it that way. Like every email I get from them is exactly the same of like, I'm
Yeah.
not that type of parent.
I'm not
And
that type of parent, but well, but it's good to have. You want kids, and you hope that all parents are kids have advocates that are the parents that have the heart of, hey, I don't want to impose, but because they want to help.
right.
And I think the more engagement, involvement, that's a it's a positive thing. I don't know if it's probably always well received that way, but
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
it is
Yeah. Yeah, when
yeah.
they get dozens of those emails in
Yeah.
every day. All
Right.
right, so let's go back to your story then. So you decide to go architecture college.
Yep.
Was there a moment in college where you second guess any of that?
No, no, I was just so excited to be there and actually seeing it come to fruition. I think when I was looking for schools, I toured a lot of different architecture schools, and they all had kind of different focuses. I ended up going to Rice University here, and that's what brought me to Houston. And I loved their program. One, it's very small, so you had a great relationship with your colleagues, but also your professors. But they really I mean, it was architecture, but they really taught us how to critically think. And I think that was the most interesting and beneficial is there were projects that were not really architecturally based at all. It might be a little bit spatial, but it was really how to analyze a building, what lens to see it through, what is the impact. And so I think that has definitely influenced me being an architect for education is like understanding each move we make is important, understanding the impact of those moves, that it isn't just a wall or a form, but it really is memory making and transforming the individuals in that space. And so I think that's probably helped inspire why I do what I do. So
So was there a moment where it triggered for you if I want to focus on schools?
I came out of school and I worked with this wonderful small firm and I designed churches and religious schools. And it was in that work that was so intentional, right? These so memory making, everyone remembers their school, everyone, remembers that space growing up. And also this blessing that we get to design in schools every building type under one roof. So I love because I continue to learn. Like I have been doing this now for too long. And I every day I'm learning because schools are evolving, the way learning is evolving. And now there are these huge schools that we've had the privilege of designing that they have, automotive labs and cosmetology and engineering robotics fields and, digital media studios. In what other environment can you do all of that in one roof? And so as those programs evolve and change, my knowledge of those, and so it's just this continual learning. It's so exciting. And then the best day ever is the first day of school, seeing the kids come in and their eyes just sparkling with this brand new school that we had the privilege of designing for them. And then the pre-K are in tears, but the rest of them are super excited. So
Yeah.
it's awesome.
I'm with you. There, being able to be involved in these projects, it is. It's one of those where, like,
Yes.
the, how lucky are we that we get to work on projects that impact literally generations in that
Yep.
community? Like, these schools are the hubs for the community, and it really does have a huge impact. Which I didn't recognize it right away. I don't know. It sounds like you may have recognized a little bit sooner than I
But
did.
also a huge responsibility. I think that's the piece that as I'm doing more work and we started this nonprofit learn the learning
I was going
environments
to ask you
action
about that.
research network. But as I'm learning more and obtaining more research, it makes me think if I could do that same building I was so proud of again, how could I apply this research? What do I know? And so making sure it's easily accessible to everyone is so important because then we're all making better informed decisions so that when we are so proud of a building, we also have the research behind making it, healthier for students or more inclusive and safer. And so I think that's another huge kind of obligation and opportunity that and responsibility that comes with our job too. So
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about Learn because I've had some exposure to it, and I cut you off when you gave the full name of it.
yeah, so Learn is a nonprofit that we were one of the founding members. We're so honored to be a part of it, and we started it actually during the pandemic. We were touring Google's office, one of their headquarters here in Texas, and we were so inspired by their workspace and how they worked, and looking to them, and they were looking to us, and they said, "Well, what does the school of the future look like?" And I was like, well, that's a good question. And so instead of having some cool renderings that we quickly churn out and, the space age, we really started to kind of um, delve a little deeper into, well, what is the school of the future? And so we brought this really diverse kind of cohort of people together from across the country and lots of different backgrounds. So we had, technology experts, we had educators, we had environmentalists, we had researchers. I mean, really diverse group. We had kind of support centers. We even had the Texas Education Agency involved, and we started just to ideate. We didn't have an outcome. It was kind of a refreshing, like we're not looking for an outcome. We're just ideating together. And we started to think, well, what is the school of the future? And we started to break down, okay, well, there's some essential components that schools, they need to be safe, they need to provide health, they need to have kind of equity and access for different opportunities and learning. And so we started to realize there's a lot of great information out there, that people just don't have access to it, and that it's not easily digestible. And so we realized that maybe one of the first things we could do is use those same kind of categories of exploration to curate research that's out there, and make it free and easily digestible for passionate parents, school districts to make informed decisions. So we started it about a year and a half ago, I'd say. We had our first symposium in Austin. We're having two this year, one on the East and West Coast. But it's really exciting to see not just the research come forward, but also the relationship building between school districts, researchers, about how am I going to implement this? What does that mean to me? And how have we been struggling as a district with this, and start to build those kind of professional relationships across the country as well. So it's been a huge privilege to be a part of it. We're really excited about it.
I'm just so glad you guys are doing it because
Thank
I didn't know about it until we had already kind of gone down our journey of starting a different nonprofit.
you.
And if I would have known you guys were doing that, I probably just would have been like, hey, can we put these together?
You can still come. You can be a part of it. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, and I would love to be involved in any way. And I love that you're doing it because it really is. It's like, how do we get better as an industry in there? Our nonprofit's a little different. That second class foundation that we started, where it was more of the idea of how do we get this message out to the general public who may not have the exposure like we have because of our careers where we are actively in schools. So I think they can work hand in hand because I think the bigger problem is like multifaceted. But I did look at Learn and what you guys are doing. I'm like, how can we set it up in a similar structure that maybe solves a different problem, but aimed at the same end result of these need to be better. I always put my
Yes.
hand up here, and then for the people who are watching on Zoom, it gives the thumbs up on here
Yeah.
or on YouTube, wherever you watch
That's
it.
that's
Uh,
perfect. I love your organization because you guys are so wonderful at storytelling. And I mean, obviously, I love this platform as well. But I think the importance of kind of telling the story, hearing it from the practitioners and the districts that are they're doing. I know you interviewed one of my clients and good friends, and so I think you're doing a really what you're doing is really exciting. And I think storytelling is how all communication used to take place. And so I
right.
think we need to get back into the kind of historic storytelling because it makes it so personable and memorable. And so I
Yeah, it
appreciate
does. And we have a lot of stereotypes we need to break down. So, I mean, most people, if you ask them, what do you think a school looks like? They're going to think it looks like whatever they went to school in, or Ferris Bueller, or whatever, like whatever pops in their mind, or every
yes,
stock image
yes,
that like every newspaper is going to pull of some empty
yeah,
straight road chairs and or a teacher up front. And
that's right,
we need to break down the stereotypes to the point where the parents are the ones saying, wait, why are we doing this?
right,
We need to change
right,
this, and then to have all the work that you're doing and with Learn to be like, yeah, and here's the research to back
that's
it
right.
up.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think education was originally designed for a very different, I mean, educating, but for a very different result and for a very, different industry. And now everything is changing. AI, automation, a lot of jobs are going to be transformed or obsolete. And so we need to think critically, creatively, or we're not going to be prepared and armed for the future. And if we create environments where everyone is so equitable that they don't have that freedom, I don't know that they're going to be prepared for what the future is going to hold.
so I want to hear more about your work with PKB. I guess let's start with what's your official title.
Oh, okay. PBK. So I am the national K-12 leader. So I am a senior principal with the firm, but I have the privilege of working with our entire company across from coast to coast to look at education, specifically, K-12 education, and how we can transform and change how we operate to better serve our clients, but also better serve our kids in our communities. And so I get to see a lot of great things happening across the country, different priorities, focuses, all really important and impactful challenges that everyone's facing with different funding and what that means. Kids that are really coming to school with a lot of struggles, and how we can help with the built environment, with what we can control to really support them. So that's my job.
Okay. Did I say
Mhm.
PBK wrong? I did, didn't I?
I think well, it's okay. That's
All right.
okay.
If we catch it, we'll edit it out.
Okay, that's fine.
But yeah, so with PBK then, because I know some of our conversation and talk about the focus on the whole student and health beyond, because there's definitely a lot to talk about, like just mental health and making sure that we're creating like healthy environments. But I think what the way you guys are looking at this, it's a little deeper than that.
We are this year. We've kind of focused on a year of health, and we're doing it internally for our own staff and team, as well as in the work that we're producing. So we started off the year and we did a survey. Ended up getting about a little over 270 responses from school district administrators of kind of what is your health focus for your students, for yourself, for your staff. Overwhelmingly, social, emotional, and mental health was their top concern by like 60%, followed by physical health and then kind of environmental and community health. And so we took that as an opportunity. Their concern is our concern. And so we need to make sure that the environments that we're providing and the conversations that we're having are really focused on this, because if this is a huge challenge. And there was a study that came out that like 44% of kids are coming to school with persistent sadness, hopelessness. So if that's, I mean, that's, oh my goodness, that's half the kiddos are coming to school with challenges. What can we do with, again, with things that we can control to help combat that? And so what we did is we had started kind of a Friday lecture series, and we're bringing in people that are not in our usual kind of circle of influence. And we had a professor from Cal Poly, Claire Latney, and she wrote a book that is, have you talked to
Yeah,
her?
we did. We had her on the podcast at one point.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Well,
yeah,
she's
she's great.
she's the best. And so she talked to us about how, designing for mental health. And she obviously is a huge proponent of getting kids outside and having exposure to nature. And so our whole team and a lot of our clients got to hear her and her research and expertise talk about that. And then we had another gentleman, Kevin Turner with Human Experience. He came to talk to us. He designs mental health institutions. And so that's right, the extreme. But if you're, and so one of the reasons we brought him in is, kids spend a lot of time here. And what are those triggers that, for students that are struggling, it's going to be important, but for anybody, it could be a huge influence. And so he talked a lot about just really being kind of designing with empathy and thinking about what the student is bringing to school. And acoustical sensitivities. His daughter is really sensitive, and talking about, even the materials that we're putting in, how does that trigger someone and make it an unsafe kind of environment for them and for learning, and different lighting. And so, and then the last one we just had was Lieutenant General David Huntoon, and he is a fascinating man. He was the superintendent of West Point, and he talked to us about stress. And I'm like, if there's someone that knows about stress, it's him. But he was talking about the kind of the healthy benefits of stress, and then the harmful, and how as leaders and as we're designing to really be thinking about these kind of stressful situations. So this webinar kind of series, we kind of homegrown, we've been focused thus far on mental health. We're about to transition to physical, but we've learned a lot as hopefully a company and a team, of really being thoughtful in every facet of wayfinding, lighting, color, temperature, materials, texture, sound, de-squaring a room so that there's not, cacophony within a room that's harmful for students. So I think the more that we can kind of bring in other people that have this specialized research and passion, it will make us all better individuals in our own personal health, but also in the way we design. So it's been we're only halfway through, but it's been eye-opening for me and really exciting, hopefully for
That
everyone
is
that has
really
that
cool. Yeah,
opportunity.
to hear of just that change in perspective, how it actually changes, like how you design the
Yes.
building. That is so
Yes.
cool. What, uh,
It's really cool.
what, what I see now, I'm curious, like what your future ones are. Do you
Oh,
know?
okay.
Were
Yeah,
were you organizing this? Were you part
I
of
was.
picking?
Because I love to learn. Um, so then we have two more coming up. So we have one we have Roberta Anding. She is a professor at Baylor College of Medicine as well at Rice. She is the, I think, former dietitian for the Houston Astros, but she has done a ton of research about the importance of physical health and so not only nutrition, but obviously physical fitness. And so, with the overwhelming amount of students either being malnourished, with poor nutrition and/or not physically fit,
Right.
she's going to be really kind of interesting to talk about. How do we design our buildings so that we're encouraging people to have movement? And then our final one is a friend of mine, Jaime Gonzalez. He was with the Nature Conservancy, and he's a former educator as well, but he has done a ton of research and work around kind of environmental and community health and how we can support our communities with these environments. And so you mentioned kind of that the schools are kind of this kind of beacon and kind of lily pad for the neighborhood. And so how do we make sure that we're being good stewards with the resources, and so that our schools are able to be public parks, they are able to hold more water, help cool, and retain heat, and do all of the kind of work harder for us, but as a stewardship for the community. So
That
that's
that's really cool. All
here.
right, I may steal some ideas. We always do like our team. We always do these like quarterly initiatives, and we'll do like some
Oh,
different
good.
like learning event. Ours aren't
Yes.
always like sometimes they're like they're more sophisticated. Sometimes they're as much as like we watch a season of Ted Lasso together. So
It was fun and you bonded. It was good.
exactly, yeah. And
Yeah,
there is a lot about teamwork and leadership and things that came from that we still refer back to.
that's right.
But yeah, but being able to do that, so that's really cool that you're
Yeah,
doing
really
that.
excited.
You have a unique perspective then too of being national. It's what I always say. I'm like I feel like so lucky because we are national and we get exposure in different ones. How much time are you spending? Like I'm assuming it's still predominantly Texas, but are you also like how much time are you working in other states as well?
I'm traveling more and working on projects really starting from coast to coast. I'm working on a really neat project in Virginia. It's early childhood. I think the whole country is starting to really talk about the importance of early childhood education. But this campus is really unique because something staggering like 64% of the students are coming with a neurodiversity to the campus. That's a huge percentage of the campus. And so we are making the entire campus inclusive so that every playground, every classroom has the opportunity to serve any student, no matter what their kind of differing needs or kind of learning challenges and opportunities are. So that's a really cool project coming out of Virginia. I'm working in North Carolina and Florida. Florida is growing so rapidly, and there's so much neat opportunity happening there. California, Tacoma. So yeah, seeing the different perspectives, and then also hearing about, a lot of these places are fortunate because they are growing or developing and they have the funding. I think the a lot of the questions I get, and you probably get this too, is for the ones that don't have the same bonds, and they're
Right.
not building brand new schools, like what's the biggest bang for my buck, like what can I do to influence change but starting on a kind of grassroots effort. And so those are just as fun and impactful of projects because you're taking something that is an existing infrastructure and you're saying, okay, how can I be good stewards and have limited
Right.
resources and make a big impact?
Yeah, I always say because those constraints are actually what foster that creativity
That's
in
right.
there. Like my line I've used before is like, people will be like, "Well, what's the best furniture?" I'm like, honestly, like I would start with nothing, and I can probably design a better environment if you just go to Costco and pick things out there. And I'm joking in some degree, but in some degree, like that does matter. Obviously, you're not going to get the quality level, and ones that are at the right quality to be able to put into a school. But the whole
Right.
idea of that, it's really not necessarily about the furniture. It is about fostering that right learning environment. And yeah, and it's been just fun to see that happening, and to the point of like seeing what other states are doing. I'm always like learning from other states and be like, "Ooh, look what they're doing over here. Can we pull that in to some other projects where like maybe there isn't anything in the state where they've taken that approach to it?"
That's right. I think one of my it has become an advocacy or platform is the importance of nature and getting kids outside, and it's seemingly so it's the most economical. That's kind of my sales pitch for it is it's, you don't have to necessarily
Right.
build anything. Just give kids an opportunity to go outside, foster that, fresh air, natural environment, sunlight. There's so much research about how it can help students. And so giving them that opportunity throughout the day, not just, elementary school kids at recess, all kids need to go outside. And so, but again, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it can have huge impact. And so those are some of the kind of big lessons learned I've had. And again, now I'm advocating for it at my own kids' school of, like, no, I know they need academic time, but they also need time to go outside. It will actually spur their academic time. So
Right. So
yeah.
can you like verbally describe like those outdoor learning environments? Because I think this is one of those things like most people aren't going to disagree. Be like, yeah, outdoors are important, but I've seen too many feel like, well, how do I like basically recreate my classroom
Right.
outside?
Right.
And I think we've seen some different stuff. Do you mind talking through like
Sure.
what are
I
those
don't think
outdoor environments you've
I
seen?
don't think you have to recreate a classroom outside. I mean, I think that would mean that, learning only happens within, okay, we have to have seating for everybody and you have to be focused in a direction. Or I think the beauty of going outside is you have an entire canvas or place that can be for learning. The birds flying over and understanding migration, the wildlife growing. So I think you can have a formal, place to go and conduct class outside. But I think the most successful ones I've seen have been informal. It's kids bringing over rocks and stumps and just sitting down, and they're passively learning when there's, critters walking across, and then, the wind blows and they're seeing, having the kind of just awareness of nature. I think is part of the educational experience as much as it is, hearing the story told or um so I think that's one of the, I guess, my hopefully dispelling is yes, you can have a formal classroom and move it outside. And I've seen it even where they have, technical devices and TVs and things, and that's still good. It's still good to have fresh air and it's still good, but I think that seems expensive and daunting. And formal amphitheaters and things, those are all good too, but I don't think it needs to be that. And I think even a walking trail from point A to point B can be just as educational. I was talking in where was that? Georgia, and I was advocating again for getting kids outside. And someone in the kind of the group raised their hand and they said, I had a student. This was a superintendent that had, worked their way up, and he said, I had a student, and I was about to fail this kid. He didn't pay attention. He was disruptive in class, and he said one day, like the power went out, and so we ended up having to go outside. And he's like, we walked outside, and that same student changed. And he's like, he was curious. He started asking questions. He was encouraging his friend, like, and he's like, because they had to go outside. And he said it completely changed his perspective of that student, but also he realized that student wasn't going to learn as successfully just sitting and getting in the class. And so it changed how he taught. And I thought that what an awesome application story of it doesn't have to be super formal or expensive, but just giving kids access and the opportunity. And so I'm sure there's a million stories like that that are kids collaborating in a hallway or, what have you. But these kind of, even my story, right? The non-traditional
Right.
environment of like letting me be a little more creative or free to foster that. I think that's the challenge for teachers and administrators, but also the huge opportunity to really captivate and inspire people to be who they are, but more successfully.
Yeah, those are the stories that we just can't get enough of, though. Like, because I think you and I, we get to hear it. We're fortunate. We get to hear it. We get to see it,
Yeah.
but it's just not out there enough. And it is one of those things where if you have the conversation, like I'm one of those annoying ones where I do like kind of force the conversation a little bit outside of work, where I'll just be like, "Yeah, what do you think?" And we're in Arizona, so Arizona is a completely different landscape education wise, where it is completely open enrollment. So there are uh, there's so many pros and cons to that, but one of the big things is that like there's a lot of movement from kids to around in schools, and
Mhm.
it's not uncommon for kids to switch multiple times throughout,
Wow.
throughout their educational career. So parents are forced to think about it a little bit.
Mm.
And when you start having those conversations, be like, well, do you learn better if you just sit in the same spot all the time? Do you like, like, does the environment matter to you? And when you start thinking about it, like, yes, it's really hard to negate any of that, but they're just not hearing the stories. I think when you talk about it and they hear the stories and be like, yeah, I can completely relate. My kid's the same way.
Right. So when you're seeing kids with, transition to multiple schools, is that student driven? Is it parent driven? Is what,
It
it'd be interesting to track
It
that
it
and
is
then start
so
to share
interesting.
the metrics.
Yeah, I wish I talk about this a lot because I really feel like there should be more analysis on what Arizona has done. Arizona is like one of the most mature charter school states,
Mhm.
open enrollment. So there's so much that can be learned. And then they've even kind of doubled down on it where they have this ESA money, which a lot of states are following, where the money follows the kid and the parents can actually
Mhm.
pick. So even if you're going like homeschooling, you can do that. And obviously, there's a lot, like politically, that it opens the door for a lot of things. But when it just comes down to the practical idea here, whether you agree or not, there's a lot that we can learn.
Yeah.
And
Huh.
um, I'll say one of the most disappointing things is I've learned that herd mentality is real.
Oh.
If there is a lottery or it's hard to get into a school, parents naturally get drawn to that.
Hmm.
And
You want what you can't have or what seems
yes,
exclusive.
it's amazing. Like, I mean, it's like the best example of that. And I don't want to, like there are some really good schools in Arizona. In fact, there's a charter school network that has three of the top 10 high schools in the country.
Wow.
Obviously, you start when you dig into that and you say, well, what are they top in? And they're very good at getting kids into like elite colleges. Um, so when you start putting that out there and you start putting waiting lists and lotteries and things in there, parents are
Mhm.
naturally drawn to that type of
Sure.
academic setting.
Hmm. Yeah.
And my biggest disappointment is to be like, there there has been a big movement in Arizona to more classical or traditional type of environments that are very much focused on college entry.
Mm.
And I would love to see more. And it's starting. I mean, it's happening in pockets, but
Okay.
I would love to see more that are just looking and be like, how do we raise like the best? How do we turn the kids into the best adults? Like
Yeah.
instead of
Prepare them
saying,
for their
yeah,
future,
prepare for
regardless of where
life.
their future goes. Yeah.
Exactly, prepare them for life, and not just have And I have a lot of conversations around that where it's like, if you took that parameter out, where you say, hey, the goal of K-12 education isn't to get kids either into college or into a better college, that now frees you up to really have completely different goals and start saying, well, what is the point of school? What's the goal of school?
That's right. I think, we started in Texas a number of years ago, gosh, before 2015, maybe 2014. House Bill 5 passed, and it was career and technical education driven, but with this acknowledgement that one, not college isn't for everybody, but we need to prepare students for their future wherever that is. And so it really kind of spurred this, the reinvigoration of maybe trade, but also, preparing students, whether they're going into nursing or robotics or wherever they're heading, but giving them kind of a taste of it in high school where it's a lot more, there's, I guess there's room to experiment. There's a
Yeah,
lot, it's a little bit less expensive and risky, but also giving them that opportunity. And so, because if we all are college bound, then, we're not going to be, as successful, and like,
right.
we need everybody,
Oh,
like, for our society to work, we need all hands
exactly.
going.
Yeah.
And so not everyone needs to be an engineer or needs to be an architect. Like, we need everybody to make things successful. And I think there's good, because now there's a shortage. I think we're going to start to see, and I, at least I'm seeing, in again, in Texas and
Right.
Florida, a shift to, trade schools and things like that, because there's this huge opportunity and they are booming and they're so successful, and
Yes.
these students are thriving and arguably making, I mean, determine what your metric for success is, right? But maybe making,
Right.
multiple times more money if
Hmm.
that's your metric, or and fulfilling maybe a skill or a craft that is in high demand. So
Yeah, there are a lot of dynamics that I feel are forcing this. I mean, obviously, the cost of college and the debt that it, I think there are a lot of dynamics that are changing this really quickly that maybe the average person doesn't understand or doesn't see it.
yeah,
And but I think if we fast forward 3, 5, 10 years, it's going to have a totally different view of it. And I'm like, it's not a college or trade school. Like, why can't it be and
right,
like why not be prepared for college but also know how to cook and about nutrition and find like and all the
yeah,
robotics and everything else because I think the common theme that I hear as I talk to kids is they're all bored at school, like they
hmm
want to learn, like
right,
so if they're
right,
bored, like, well, why can't we have more things that are interested that they're interested in? And
right. Right. Well, and yeah, why does the elective have to be the one, like the minority of how you
right.
spend your time? And
Exactly. Or
if
why do
you're
they
learning,
yeah, they have to get bussed
you're,
off to the trade school or the CTE.
that's right.
Like, no, like why can't we integrate all that together? And yeah, because I think when we have those conversations, like with the opportunity you had as a second
Yeah.
grader and kind of bring it full
Yeah.
circle of like
Right.
every kid should have that opportunity. And, and I know when I went through it, when I got pulled out in sixth grade, that was like you had to like qualify for it. And
Right.
and we did projects like just learning like what are the ingredients in a box of cereal. And you're
Yep.
like, why couldn't everyone get that experience?
Right. Well, and I think hopefully that's where education should go,
Yeah.
is like fostering that. And hopefully this will be the benefit of technology, is understanding what are those love languages of students, of what are they hungry for, and then leveraging technology and teachers as kind of coaches, because they can't know everything, but they can help foster an access to everything so that they can help students with whatever that is, that if they're curious about food science of, not just cooking, but the science behind it, and why, oh, the egg makes it stick together. Okay, well, that makes sense. And that's a binder. And, I think that's the hopefully the privilege of technology, as opposed to the, some of the potentially negative sides, is that we give kids more opportunity. But it's sad that it's only for some. I think that
Right.
the access and the equity piece is what I'm hoping for, and what the work that we're doing is
Yeah.
all students, no matter what your zip code is, or your background, that you have this opportunity for having access for those kind of
Yeah. And the
opportunities.
optimistic side of me is like, it is happening. I mean, we are seeing this
It is.
happen all the time right now. This is
Mhm.
definitely more the norm versus, like it's pretty rare that we're going to have somebody who wants to design like a traditional school
Right.
moving forward. The whole industry is thinking about it and moving
Mhm.
forward. I think, like the term I always use with our team is like acting with urgency and
Hmm.
patience on results is
Hmm.
everything
That's
moves
nice.
slow, but that doesn't mean we can't act with urgency because it is these generations. These kids are growing up really fast, and everyone that misses out on that, like
Right.
the
Well, and
faster we can do it better.
listening to these kids, I'm sorry I interrupted. Listening to these kids and hearing their voice, to me, that's the driver. We've, had some design charrettes and different events where we're here letting the, elementary school or even high schoolers, design their building, and seeing the school through their lens is how we should be thinking about school, right? The labs are huge, outdoor space is huge, classrooms are small, cafeteria is big. I mean, those are the things that are the reason they're coming to school. And so how can we make that the majority, but they're still going to be learning. So it's not that it's an either or, as you mentioned, but I think seeing it through their lens, because business, education is a business too. And so you mentioned in Arizona, that the dollars follow the kids for school districts. If the kids want to come, the funding comes with that kiddo. And so making sure that the environments, the kids want to come, they love the environment, they're excited to be there, and then it's good for the school too, because now they're in the district, because now they're getting those resources to help make that kid successful. So
Right.
seeing it through that lens, not that you want to see it as a business, but it is. And so if your students are attending and they're showing up to class, then that the metric for everyone is being successful, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I knew this
Mhm.
was going to happen. We probably can talk for like another 2 or 3 hours on
Okay.
this,
Oh, is it
but
time? Okay, sorry.
but yeah, I do need to wrap this up, and yeah, but I have like more topics that I want to ask you about, so
Uh-huh.
we may have to connect offline on some other things. But to the listeners, if you have not already subscribed, just subscribe wherever you're listening to this. We put it out pretty much everywhere, all the podcasts, the Spotify, everything like that, and YouTube and everywhere. So wherever you're listening, hit subscribe. Melissa, it was great talking to you more. Thank you so much for
Um,
joining.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
The views and opinions expressed on the Better Learning podcast are those of myself as an individual and my guests, and do not necessarily represent the organizations that we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.